Spinal cord pathways are crucial structures in the nervous system that facilitate communication between the brain and the rest of the body. These pathways consist of bundles of nerve fibers that transmit sensory and motor signals, enabling the brain to control voluntary movements and process sensory information from various parts of the body. Spinal cord pathways are organized into distinct tracts, each responsible for specific functions, such as proprioception, pain, temperature, and touch sensation, as well as motor control. Understanding the organization and function of these pathways is essential for comprehending how the nervous system coordinates bodily functions and responds to stimuli. Descending tracts of the spinal cord pathway are responsible for transmitting motor signals from the brain to the muscles, enabling voluntary movements and motor control. These tracts originate in the brain and descend through the spinal cord, where they synapse with motor neurons that control muscles throughout the body. Key descending tracts include the corticospinal tract, which is involved in precise, voluntary movements, and the reticulospinal and vestibulospinal tracts, which help regulate posture and balance. The proper functioning of these descending pathways is vital for coordinated movement and motor response. Damage to these tracts can result in motor impairments, underscoring their importance in maintaining movement and physical function. The motor tracts can be functionally divided into two major groups: pyramidal tracts. These tracts originate in the cerebral cortex, carrying motor fibers to the spinal cord and brain stem. They are responsible for the voluntary control of the musculature of the body and face. Extrapyramidal tracts. These tracts originate in the brain stem, carrying motor fibers to the spinal cord. They are responsible for the involuntary and automatic control of all musculature, such as muscle tone, balance, posture and locomotion. Pyramidal tracts are a set of descending motor pathways that originate in the cerebral cortex and play a crucial role in voluntary motor control. These tracts are primarily responsible for fine, skilled movements, particularly those involving the limbs and hands. The two main pyramidal tracts are the corticospinal tract and the corticobulbar tract. The corticospinal tract controls movements of the limbs and trunk, while the corticobulbar tract controls the muscles of the face and head. The tracts pass through the brainstem, where the majority of the fibers cross to the opposite side, a process known as decussation, before continuing down the spinal cord. Damage to the pyramidal tracts can lead to motor deficits such as weakness, paralysis, or loss of fine motor control, highlighting their significance in voluntary movement. The corticospinal tracts begin in the cerebral cortex, from which they receive a range of inputs such as primary motor cortex, premotor cortex, supplementary motor area. They also receive nerve fibers from the somatosensory area, which play a role in regulating the activity of the ascending tracts. After originating from the cortex, the neurons converge and descend through the internal capsule. After the internal capsule, the neurons pass through the crus cerebri of the midbrain, the pons, and into the medulla. In the most inferior part of the medulla, the tract divides into two pathways. The fibers within the lateral corticospinal tract decussate. They then descend into the spinal cord, terminating in the ventral horn segmental. From the ventral horn, the lower motor neurons go on to supply the muscles of the body. The anterior corticospinal tract remains ipsilateral, descending into the spinal cord. They then decussate and terminate in the ventral horn of the cervical and upper thoracic segmental levels. The corticobulbar tracts arise from the lateral aspect of the primary motor cortex. They receive the same inputs as the corticospinal tracts. The fibers converge and pass through the internal capsule to the brainstem. The neurons terminate on the motor nuclei of the cranial nerves. Here, they synapse with lower motor neurons, which carry the motor signals to the muscles of the face and neck. Clinically, it is important to understand the organization of the corticobulbar fibers. Many of these fibers innervate the motor neurons bilaterally. For example, fibers from the left primary motor cortex act as upper motor neurons for the right and left trochlear nerves. Extrapyramidal tracts are a group of motor pathways that originate in the brainstem and are involved in the regulation of involuntary movements, posture, balance, and muscle tone. Unlike the pyramidal tracts, which control voluntary movements, the extrapyramidal system coordinates automatic and subconscious motor functions. Key extrapyramidal tracts include the rubrospinal, reticulospinal, vestibulospinal, and tectospinal tracts. The rubrospinal tract helps control voluntary muscle movements, particularly in the upper limbs, while the reticulospinal tract regulates posture and muscle tone by influencing the motor neurons in the spinal cord. The vestibulospinal tract is crucial for maintaining balance and posture by transmitting signals from the inner ear to the muscles, and the tectospinal tract helps in reflexive movements related to visual stimuli. Dysfunction or damage to the extrapyramidal pathways can lead to movement disorders such as rigidity, tremors, and difficulty with coordination, as seen in conditions like Parkinson's disease. There are two vestibulospinal pathways, medial and lateral. They arise from the vestibular nuclei, which receive input from the organs of balance. The tracts convey this balance information to the spinal cord, where it remains ipsilateral. Fibers in this pathway control balance and posture by innervating the anti-gravity muscles via lower motor neurons. The two reticulospinal tracts have differing functions. Medial reticulospinal tract arises from the pons. It facilitates voluntary movements, and increases muscle tone. Lateral reticulospinal tract arises from the medulla. It inhibits voluntary movements, and reduces muscle tone. The rubrospinal tract originates from the red nucleus, a midbrain structure. As the fibers emerge, they decussate, cross over to the other side of the CNS, and descend into the spinal cord. Thus, they have a contralateral innervation. Its exact function is unclear, but it is thought to play a role in the fine control of hand movements. Tectospinal pathway begins at the superior colliculus of the midbrain. The superior colliculus is a structure that receives input from the optic nerves. The neurons then quickly decussate, and enter the spinal cord. They terminate at the cervical levels of the spinal cord. The tectospinal tract coordinates movements of the head in relation to vision stimuli.